anyone who owns a white Cadillac?
No.
When I heard that Tupac was shot, when I was at home. If I was at home, like.
No, didn't want to say. Okay.
On February 26, 1998, Orlando Anderson, being the #1 suspect in the murder of Tupac Shakur, was deposed, where his body language confessed to lies which he told when being questioned about the murder. In a lawsuit by Tupac's mother, naming Orlando Anderson as the killer, he was issued to be deposed on tape, then interviewed several times, with one of the interviews being analysed by a body language expert. In this video, we're gonna take a look into the case of Orlando Anderson and whether or not he killed Tupac. Orlando Anderson was born in Compton, California on August 13, 1974. By the age of just 22 in 1996, he was already being investigated by Compton PD for several murder cases. He was a member of the Southside Compton Crips, who had a reputation of being known as a hitter at a young age. He was the nephew to Keefe D, a Southside Compton Crip shot caller who played football with Suge Knight in high school and grew up to be a criminal, having connections to the Colombian cartels. It is now known through the revelation of the Iran-Contra scandal that US intelligence acted with being complicit for the Colombians' importation into the United States to fund a war in Nicaragua, with Pablo Escobar being caught on camera filling a plane fitted with CIA cameras to be flown from Nicaragua to the US. Keefe D met with New York executive producer Puff Daddy sometime between 1993 and 1994 after Puff Daddy had called a lowrider shop which Keefe D owned to acquire a car to be used in Usher's debut music video. A month after this, Keefe D was invited to a party by Eric Von Zip, who was a New York drug trafficker who also knew Puffy. Then while at the party, Keefe D was officially introduced to Puffy. Puffy started giving the Southside Crips tickets to his shows while he was in Los Angeles to supply security, although he has denied this several times in the past.
Bad Boy Entertainment had actually hired Crips for security work out on the West Coast. Is that true?
We've never hired Crips or any other gang faction to do security for us.
Orlando Anderson was one of the Crips who started to show up to the shows after getting free concert tickets to supply security. Puffy used this Crips connection to protect himself against Suge Knight and his Compton Bloods. Suge Knight was a record executive from Compton, California, who was aligned with the MOB Compton Piru Bloods. Hen Dog, being one of these Bloods, told the police in a statement that Keefe D was Puffy's main connection to the Southside Crips. Puffy and Suge Knight had beef from 1995 which got bitter after Puffy was blamed for the murder of Suge Knight's friend and Blood gang member Jake Robles, which took place at a party both were at after a confrontation happened. Suge Knight and Puffy had beef throughout 1995 and 1996, where there was always some tension whenever they would run into each other. Tupac Shakur, who was a big artist during the time, had signed to Death Row Records in October of 1995 after he had been bailed out of prison, and Suge Knight and him now both had beef with Puff Daddy along with his artist Biggie Smalls, stemming back to 1994. There was animosity between Death Row Records and Puff Daddy's label Bad Boy Records, which led to a shooting taking place in December of 1995 between Death Row artists The Dog Pound and Snoop Dogg, who were shot at in the East Coast by unknown shooters after Biggie Smalls had announced that they were there while on the radio. Due to all the animosity which took place and there being blood on the hands of Puffy down to Jake Robles, who was a Blood gang member and Suge Knight's friend, Keefe D claims after Puffy performed at a concert in Anaheim, California in December of 1995, he allegedly took the Southside Crips back to a hotel room party where he allegedly talked on how life would be a lot easier if Suge Knight and Tupac were gone. Lil Cease, who was a part of the Junior Mafia group under Biggie Smalls, with Biggie Smalls being signed to Puffy, confirmed this during a police interview, confirming the Southside Crips are with Puffy backstage in Anaheim.
Like they was backstage, on a show. We did a show at the Anaheim Coliseum.
A rumour had started on the streets of Compton between the gang members that Puffy had placed a bounty on death row necklaces. Orlando Anderson in 1996 attempted to steal the death row chain of Suge Knight's associate and blood gang member Trayvon Lane inside a Foot Locker store within the Lakewood Mall in California. Around about this same time, Orlando Anderson was also identified by an eyewitness as being the triggerman in a homicide in Compton in April of 1996. Tupac released Hit 'Em Up on June 4th, 1996, which was a diss record towards Puffy, Biggie, along with the record company Bad Boy Records. The diss highly increased the tension between the two labels, as Tupac made allegations of sleeping with Biggie's wife Faith Evans. After this, Keefe D claims in the summer of 1996, Puffy met with him in the Greenblatt's Deli in Los Angeles, where they allegedly discussed a $1 million bounty for the West Coast problem. A Southside Crip informant told the police that there was word on the street that there was a standing $1 million death contract between Bad Boy Records and the Southside Crips. Tupac and Suge Knight were shot at in a drive-by shooting on September 7th, 1996, while on the Las Vegas Strip, with the main suspects becoming the Southside Crips. Orlando Anderson on September 7th, 1996 was driven to Las Vegas by fellow Southside Crips Terrence Brown and DeAndre Smith. Terrence Brown used a car rented by his mother-in-law from an auto shop in Compton. Now the crazy thing is, police reports reveal that two identical white Cadillacs were rented at the exact same time, with one being used by Terrence Brown and the other renter not being revealed. Some have come to believe that the renting of the same model and colour Cadillacs could have been seen as a decoy strategy, with someone having knowledge of the Crips rental. Orlando Anderson and the other Southside Crips drove up to Las Vegas to meet Keefe D in the lobby bar within the MGM Grand Hotel to watch a Mike Tyson fight which was taking place in the MGM Grand. The Southside Crips did not have tickets for the fight, so they planned to watch it with Eric Von Zip while they were in the lobby bar. On the morning of that day, Tupac's bodyguards, Frank Alexander and Michael Moore, along with others, met with Death Row Records head of security, former Compton cop Reggie Wright Jr., at the house of the attorney for a nightclub called Club 662. Tupac was forced to travel to Las Vegas by death row lawyers and the judicial system, as he had to perform a benefit gig for a Metro police officer as part of community service at Club 662. George Kalisis, the attorney for the club, put together the charity event, which was being held for a Metro police officer, where Suge Knight was encouraged to invite celebrities to the event, with Mike Tyson set to appear there after the fight. Frank Alexander and Michael Moore, while at the morning meeting at George Kalisis' home, were told by Reggie Wright Jr. and George Kalisis not to carry their weapons while guarding Tupac. Frank Alexander followed the orders and left his gun in his car, whereas Michael Moore refused to give up his weapon, so Reggie Wright Jr. removed him from Tupac and told him to stay at the club. Reggie Wright Jr. has claimed that he actually told the bodyguards not to carry their weapons while in the club due to the charitable event which was going on. However, this becomes a contradiction, as he told Michael Moore to stay with him at the club after he had refused to give up his weapon. Tupac and Suge Knight watched the Mike Tyson fight ringside, and after leaving and walking through the MGM Grand lobby, they saw Orlando Anderson, who was standing in the lobby and was clearly not watching a fight at the lobby bar. Trayvon Lane, being a blood gang member who had a chain snatching attempt by Orlando Anderson prior to it, pointed out Orlando Anderson to Suge Knight and Tupac. Tupac and Suge Knight ran over and attacked him along with the death row entourage. Afterwards, Tupac and Suge Knight left the MGM Grand while Orlando Anderson returned to the lobby bar to Keefe D and the Southside Crips. Keefe D claims Zip, who was there with them when Orlando returned, reminded them about the $1 million bounty and how it was the perfect opportunity, giving them a reason to claim it. Keefe D claims two vehicles then drove to Club 662 waiting for Tupac and Suge Knight to arrive, as Tupac was set to perform there, with this being confirmed by Mob James, who was part of Suge Knight's gang security, who was at the club and saw the Crips pull up outside. Keefe D claimed after taking too long, him along with Orlando Anderson, Terrence Brown and DeAndre Smith then got into the white Cadillac and eventually found Suge Knight and Tupac in a BMW on the Las Vegas Strip. Keefe D, during a police interview which he was carrying out to get himself off of a crime, claimed he gave a Glock to Orlando Anderson, who fired it into the BMW, hitting Tupac 4 times and leaving Suge Knight with head injuries and injuries to the chest.
Orlando shot across Dre.
He leaned over on the window, we rolled down the window, popped.
Michael Moore, who was at Club 662 with Reggie Wright Jr., claimed in the documentary Tupac Assassination Conspiracy or Revenge that he heard someone say "got him" over Reggie Wright's radio. Reggie Wright Jr. has gone on to address this within interviews, where he claimed it didn't happen. 6 days after the shooting, Tupac died in hospital after his mother took him off of life support as he was struggling while on it. After the murder took place, a gang war broke out in Compton between Suge Knight's Bloods and the Southside Compton Crips. There was a bounty of $100,000 on the heads of each person believed to be in the Cadillac. Police reports later revealed one of the white Cadillacs had been returned to the auto shop, which had bullet markings from returned fire. Compton raids took place and Orlando Anderson was taken in and given over to the Las Vegas PD, but he was released afterwards and they didn't believe he was a suspect. Former LA detective Russell Paul claimed this was as CCTV footage showed Orlando Anderson was actually at the lobby bar during the time of the shooting, which Las Vegas PD knew of, therefore didn't keep him as a suspect. Orlando Anderson was deposed afterwards, where his body language revealed he was lying about knowing someone who owned a Cadillac. As you can see, he says no, while his body language reveals that his head nods yes. A&E miniseries Who Killed Tupac got a body language expert to analyze Orlando Anderson's interviews.
Filed a lawsuit Friday, naming you as
right there. Did you see that? The hard swallow is very indicative of some kind of guilty behavior. I think it's highly likely that if nothing else, Orlando was incredibly involved.
During other interviews, he claimed he believes he was a scapegoat used in the murder plot.
I mean, I've been thinking, maybe I'm a scapegoat or something.
This gets into the theory that Orlando Anderson was a pawn used as a decoy, much like how 2 of the same Cadillacs were rented from the auto shop, which matched the one used by the Southside Crips. Tupac's brother Mopreme Shakur has spoken on this as he believes Orlando Anderson was a pawn or patsy used as someone to blame. A former Compton PD officer has also spoke on this.
There's some people who claim that Orlando Anderson was a pawn. He was planted there in the MGM brand to get beat down.
Suge Knight, during a recent prison interview, claimed himself that Orlando Anderson was not the shooter.
The sad thing about it, Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know?
Shortly after, Orlando Anderson was killed at the age of 23 in 1998 during an unrelated incident in Compton. The first person on the scene was Reggie Wright Sr., who was also a cop, being the father of Reggie Wright Jr., who was the head of Compton's gang division. After Orlando Anderson was killed, a .40 caliber Glock randomly appeared in the backyard of a girlfriend to a Southside Crip who was in Las Vegas. The gun was ran through ballistics testing and it matched the casings found which were used in the murder case. Former FBI agent Kevin Hackey, who worked undercover as Tupac's bodyguard to infiltrate Death Row Records, claimed on Fox News that this same weapon was confiscated by a Santa Monica cop off of Tupac's entourage, being his artist Hussein Fatal, on the 4th of July 1996, and was then given to former Compton cop Reggie Wright Jr., being Death Row's head of security.
An off-duty Santa Monica cop working security confiscated a .40 caliber Glock handgun similar to this. Hackey says he first showed the handgun to his FBI handlers and then turned it over to Reggie Wright Jr. Hackey believes the murder weapon was the same gun he gave Reggie Wright Jr.
Later on, Kevin Hackey went on to retract all of these claims. In this video, we took a look into the #1 suspect in the murder case of Tupac Shakur. Suge Knight himself claims Orlando Anderson was not the shooter, and along with this, Las Vegas PD didn't suspect that he was the shooter either. Due to claims made by LA detective Russell Paul, who claimed Orlando Anderson was seen on CCTV at the lobby bar during the time of the shooting, people believe Orlando Anderson was just a pawn being used as a scapegoat within a bigger scheme.
He now believes this fight involving Tupac and a rival Crip gang member at the MGM Hotel was staged so the rival could later be blamed for Tupac's murder.
Let me know what your thoughts are on all this in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, smash the thumbs up button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell button so you can get all the future notifications for when I upload. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.